What a year it's been since last week. This time on Poll Hub, Joe Biden got COVID, the RNC wrapped up, and then things moved very quickly in American politics. Joe Biden bowed out of the race over the weekend, and by Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris had gained enough support from delegates to ensure that she will be the one running against Donald Trump in November. We wanted to get the immediate reaction from Americans on this, so we'll be talking about our one-day poll, what it shows, what it may mean, and why one-day polls are useful to a point. Then, as the first boomers hit old age, the state of nursing homes in the U.S. has become a big topic. We're talking with an expert who thinks that maybe, just maybe, now that it finally impacts boomers, some things will finally change. And for the fun fact, ooh la la. The Summer Olympics opening in Paris this week, we wonder which summer sport Americans are generally most interested in. So, bienvenue sur Poll Hub. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Mary Griffiths.
I'm Delaney Hayes.
And I am Lee Marigoff.
So, busy week is probably an incredible understatement. This is a whirlwind. Lee, you mentioned last week in the show that the number of cataclysmic events that in any other campaign year would be huge, would be the thing of the campaign. They happen every week, actually every couple of days now, and this period has been no different. We noted that Biden's out. Kamala Harris is in. Looks like she's got enough delegate support to actually be the nominee, and she's already running like the nominee. She's raised, tons and tons of money. We wanted to get a really quick snapshot of what Americans thought. So we went in the field on Monday, the day after Joe Biden dropped out, to ask Americans what they thought about all of this. We don't normally do one-day polls. We're going to talk about that and what they mean. But Lee, let's first talk about what the results showed and what do you think they mean? Because one-day polls, one day out from the big event, things can change.
Yeah, well, I think, this was a potential really cataclysmic event that may actually turn into one. We've had so many things and the numbers don't change. But what was interesting about this is the numbers on the top line looked very familiar. You had a Trump by 1 point advantage in a two-way. Among the definite votes, it was totally even at 47 each. Multi-field, even among registered voters, and Harris with a 2-point advantage. So everything's in the margin of error on that. I would say generally that when you look at all the polls that have been out, in not just ours, others as well, I think Harris has added a couple points preliminarily to the numbers for the Democrats. And I think that has to do with the enthusiasm factor. I think we saw that 77% in this poll were very happy, Democrats and independent-leaning Democrats, very happy that she is the nominee. There was across the board that Joe Biden should have dropped out. And although Democrats and Republicans and independents may have a different motive for saying that, they all about say the same. It's like roughly 9 in 10 voters.
And that was, Lee, that's pretty remarkable. As we've noted a lot, Americans don't agree on almost anything when you divide by partisanship, right? And here, nearly 9 in 10 Democrats, Republicans, independents said, yeah, see ya.
I'll be snarky. Joe Biden said he wanted to unify America. And what I think was also interesting in the enthusiasm category is when you look at the definitely vote folks, there's a higher number for Harris and Trump. And when you look at those who say they're now more likely to vote, the Harris folks are up 6 points over Trump on that in terms of just reacting to, that piece of analysis. Lots of other things, though. I think it's a lot of undecided folks out there and a lot of independents, a lot of suburban voters still letting this form. It has to cure yet in the cooking jargon.
Well, I think Lee did point out a lot of the key findings here. One thing that I think is interesting because the Republicans, as we've been hearing in the media reports, many of which are calling for Biden to resign now. According to our poll with NPR and PBS News, 32% of Americans think he should leave office now and just let the country move on. But more than 2 and 3, 68% think that he should stick it out and complete the rest of his term in office, which he is saying he will certainly do and continue doing the business for the American people. But one thing that I do think is interesting, because there's been a lot of talk about Biden's legacy and what does this mean, and his decision to exit the presidential contest, does speak to his legacy. And when we asked Americans how they think he will be remembered, 31% think that he'll be thought of as one of the worst presidents, 19%, below average, 23%. 26%, an average president, 13% think he'll be considered one of the best presidents, and 14% think that he'll be considered an above average president. Now, those are a lot of numbers, but we should say, not surprisingly, this is driven by very deep and stark partisan differences here in terms of their oppression of Joe Biden. And so, as we've seen, of course, with other presidents who have left office with lower approval ratings, lots of controversy, history does tend to be kinder to the outgoing president as the years and the decades persist. But one thing I do want to point out is that Biden's approval rating is still pretty much where it has been consistently, not only over the months, but also over the decades. But Barb, as Lee pointed out, we do want to get to the methodology, but I will tease a little bit that I'm sure that Lee certainly will want to weigh in on the Democratic veep stakes that I'm sure that has been playing out.
We'll get there. I should point out also that we are talking on Wednesday, and Joe Biden will be talking to the nation tonight, and as in Wednesday evening, and he's sort of probably making a pitch for legacy points right there. But Barb, why don't you jump in?
Well, I think it's really interesting because in an odd sort of way, Joe Biden really turned the tables on former President Trump by not only stealing the story, but also kind of redefining the agenda. I mean, one of the things we expect coming out of a party convention is that the nominee of that convention gets their so-called bounce. And they get a second, third, or fourth look from the American people. They get to parade their vice presidential pick and get a lot of attention. And I think that although all of those things happen, there's a official nominee for the Republicans, not surprising, but there is also a vice presidential candidate. I think that the discussion really has focused this week not so much on what the Republicans were talking about last week, but rather on what happened over the weekend with the president dropping out of his reelection campaign. So that put a halt to any kind of bounce that might have benefited former President Trump after last week. That said, so Jay, you pointed out that we really can't seem to keep up with this presidential election campaign. And if the yesterdays are any indication of what our tomorrows are going to be, we're going to continue to work quickly to get a sense of where people are and what people are thinking. So that was kind of the rationale behind our idea and the idea of our partners, NPR and PBS News, to figure out a way to be able to capture public opinion still in a scientific manner, but in a faster way. And, one-day polls are not really new to polling. Way back decades ago, we used to call them tracking polls, and a number of organizations used to do these one-day polls each night leading up to Election Day. So they're not new. And we do have a lot of research, and we do know a lot about them. And they do have some drawbacks to them in the sense that we are talking to people who are readily available. So we're not doing our callbacks. But what we have been doing is this methodology has been anywhere from a third to 40% of the polls that we have been doing over the last 2 years in our hybrid method, where we have included other sampling frames, meaning other lists, cell phone lists, landline lists of people whom we contact. And so we have been measuring over time any differences among these different modes of communicating: online, text, telephone. And so we have a pretty good sense of who we speak with when we connect online with these folks. And we can adapt that and model that accordingly, even if we're not including folks who we would contact via text or via phone. That's the down and dirty side of it. The other part of it is that we have also been looking and testing out the concept of how do we connect with people online. Unlike texting or using telephone in any manner, there is no universal list of Americans who are online. So in the past, other organizations have either tried to contact people by telephone or some other mode, ask them to participate in a panel over time, or they've asked people to opt in. So they've kind of advertised and said, hey, you want to be part of a poll? Join our panel. So when we've looked at, and I know this is going on and getting pretty geeky, but when we've looked at polls individually over probably, the last decade or so, we have found that there have been biases, which I think a number of these organizations take into account. But if we're, as a separate organization that's not developing our own panel, are looking at these, we found different biases in specific panels. So what we have been testing and experimenting with over the last probably 4 to 6 years is what would happen if we were able to aggregate all of these different commercial panels and select from all of them. In other words, our sampling frame now is not just any one panel, but rather it's many of the commercial panels that organizations use. And so we call this our aggregated online survey, because what we've done is we've aggregated all of these panels, and then we select randomly from all of those panels. And what we found is that we seem to end up with a pretty representative, comparable result that we do, whether we're texting or we're calling online. There are some, slight differences which we take into account, but over this time, we have collected an awful lot of information from all of these different modes that we have used, and so feel very comfortable going out in times like these where there are dramatic events that occur, where it is helpful to have public opinion in its aggregate rather than just the pundits speculating or the partisans spinning. And so we have done, for the first time, this one-day poll with our partners, but you are likely to see others as well, because if you compare our results using this methodology to some of the other polls that have come out in the last couple of days, you'll see we are all pretty much singing a very similar song.
I was going to make that point, and I was also going to indicate that we are being very transparent about this because everybody can learn from each other. And as you say, there's no all proven, all agreed upon way of proceeding in this kind of environment that we find ourselves in. We did promise before we go, though, to mention some of the vice presidential candidates who are being mentioned, and I wouldn't want to leave that hanging. One of the things I thought was very surprising is that a lot of the potential people are pretty well known. So I wanted to go around and just say that Whitmer at 21 and Buttigieg at 21 in the numbers, followed by the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and the Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. Others are getting smaller numbers in that. And do we want at this point, are we going to hold off a week or so till we make our inside bet on who the nominee is going to be for vice president?
If you want to make a prediction, I think now is the time, because I think this is going to move pretty fast.
Okay, so I'll start with you, Barb. Who do you got?
Oh, thanks.
That was a reversal.
Well, let's see. I am a Mark Kelly from Arizona advocate. I think if Kamala Harris has one weakness coming out of being part of the Biden administration, most of the issues she can step back and say, I was veep, I wasn't president making those decisions. And when it's a good thing, she can take credit for it. But one thing that she was part of was the border and immigration. And I think that's a pretty significant issue for the Republicans if they're able to change the agenda to that topic. So I would think that Mark Kelly would be to her benefit. Coming from Arizona, certainly someone who is well aware with dealing with the issue and someone that she can turn to in the vice presidential role to take a lead on that.
Okay, Mary, where do you put your $1 down?
I'm going to be short since we're over time. I ditto Barb with Mark Kelly.
There is some union issues with him that are going to be vetted before he actually would be designated. But Jay DeDapper, don't say Mark Kelly, please.
It should be Whitmer, because if I'm running a campaign, I want to run 2 women against Donald Trump and the other bro WrestleMania guy, Vance.
Yeah.
I think that's super. It's a great campaign thing. She said she doesn't want it. That doesn't mean she's not going to get it. So I'm going to put my bet on that because it's a long shot, but Kelly or Shapiro are the safeties.
Yeah, and I agree totally with that. I would say also that if you're going to run on a lot of Roe v. Wade issues and you're going to, double down on the battle of the sexes and go with Whitmer, I think that's a good choice. But I'm going to go with the gang. If it's not her, I think it's Mark Kelly.
But I'm just going to end with one thing, and that is we've talked a lot about poll numbers in this segment and about polls. I still see this as an incredibly competitive race. 2 points one way or the other means absolutely nothing, and we've got a long campaign to go.
So today's topic, we'll be talking about nursing homes in America. And there's been a lot of narrative around nursing homes in America and that they are falling apart. And does anyone care enough to fix them? Well, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed some deep flaws in America's long-term care system, highlighting issues that will continue to harm vulnerable residents and workers long after this pandemic fades away. And it may worsen as the giant boomer generation enters them. So we found a poll from the Gallup Poll 2023, which was a survey conducted by Webb. And let's dig into some of the numbers here. So more than 4 in 10 U.S. adults grade nursing homes negatively for overall quality of care. And this is graded on a number scale. So 36% give them a D, which is a poor rating, and 6% an F, which is a fail rating. 33% grade nursing homes as satisfactory, a C, while few rate them positively, with an excellent A at only 1% or good B at 8%. And when these grades are averaged, it gives an overall D+ rating to the nursing homes. 10 U.S. adults say they would be very or somewhat uncomfortable with being admitted to a nursing home, and if they could no longer care for themselves. And nearly as many, 61%, feel the same way about the prospect of admitting a relative or family member into such a facility. Why all the bad rap? This survey also dug into some of the reasons why these people indicated such a poor rating of nursing homes. By far at the top is the quality of care, with 70% choosing this, cost at 49%, concerns about potentially negative impact an admission could have on the respondents' mental and emotional health at 45%, fear of losing independence 34%, fear of dying in the facility 28%, and concerns about their personal physical safety coming in at 27%. The survey also found that more than 4 in 10 U.S. adults, 42%, say nursing homes are not very or not at all effective in keeping residents safe from avoidable harms such as infections, pressure wounds, and abuse and neglect. So there is definitely a lot of data to dig in here as to why these nursing home facilities are getting such a bad rep. Today we have Tamara Konetzka, the Lewis Block Professor of Public Health Sciences at the University of Chicago. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, Lee, I don't know if you wanted to start off with the first question.
I'd be happy to, Delaney. A general overall, anything in these numbers surprise you? Would you share from your professional standpoint in public health, share the public opinion on this?
Sure. It's not at all surprising that people don't want to go to nursing homes, right? I mean, I think that's just a function of being human. We don't want to face getting older, needing help with functional or cognitive impairment. So the idea of going to a nursing home is kind of scary for most of us. That said, about 1.5 million people at any point in time in this country actually do live in a nursing home, right? And I think that's just the reality, that sometimes we get impaired enough that we need that kind of 24-hour care and our families can no longer take care of us, right? So it's not surprising that people don't want to go to a nursing home, but the fact is that nursing homes are probably here to stay and they fulfill an essential function.
I get that people are reluctant to go into a nursing home. The public thinks quality of care is the number one shortcut. Does that make sense from your perspective?
For sure, that also makes sense. I think the quality of care in nursing homes has been an issue, a challenge for decades now, right? Way back in the 1980s, the Institute of Medicine at that point, now the National Academy, sort of uncovered all kinds of quality problems and abuse that led to a very kind of comprehensive regulatory system. And still we see challenges with the quality of care in nursing homes in general. There are certainly very good places. There are a lot of places, though, where the quality of care is substandard. And I think, consumers are therefore right to sort of be concerned about the quality of care they might get if they need that level of care. I think there are, though, a couple of underlying issues that long before the pandemic hit and sort of revealed these issues, there are these underlying structural problems that are really hard to solve, right? One is just the way we pay for long-term care in this country. We don't have a systematic way to pay for long-term care. And it turns out about 2/3 of the people in a nursing home at any given point in time are having their care paid by Medicaid. So Medicaid is really the dominant payer in long-term care in general in this country, and certainly in nursing homes. Contrary to popular belief, Medicare doesn't pay for long-term care. And so if you're not poor enough to qualify for Medicaid, or you don't sort of spend down all your assets while trying to pay for nursing home care, people don't really have a lot of options. You would have to pay out of pocket for care at home or care in a nursing home. And so that just sets up a system that's kind of perpetually underfunded. Right? States don't have unlimited Medicaid budgets to try to support a higher level of quality in Medicaid through Medicaid funding of nursing homes.
When I was doing some of this research on this segment, I found that one of the biggest problems is finding qualified healthcare professionals to work these jobs in these long-term care facilities. Could you speak more to that and potentially how we could attract more people to work in this area and how we could fix that issue a bit?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that because that's a really fundamental problem in long-term care and in nursing homes. Staffing is kind of what nursing homes do, right? I mean, people go there because they need hours of hands-on assistance every day. So staffing really is everything. And having enough staff is therefore kind of fundamental to have higher quality. And it's been a challenge for many decades as well to try to increase those staffing levels. The pandemic, through a lot of sort of mechanisms, made that challenge even harder in that we have at the same time understaffing in nursing homes, but an economy such that it's really hard to find those low-wage workers, right? And so nursing homes right now are faced with this problem of everybody wants higher staffing in nursing homes. The Biden administration has now passed a regulation requiring higher staff in nursing homes, levels that most nursing homes today don't meet. So there needs to be a lot of hiring, but it's a little bit unclear still exactly where the funds are going to come from to hire more staff and where they're going to find those staff. It probably varies from market to market across the U.S., but, I guess we're all hoping that nursing homes will just find a way to meet these regulations because we know we need higher staffing.
Does this keep the new regulations connect with the standards of the field? In other words, if we got to that level of hiring, would things be indeed really much better?
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question because we know we need more staffing, but assessing exactly what that correct level is of staffing is harder than one might think because you have to really adjust for a lot of factors such as how sick the residents are in your facility. That there's not really a one-size-fits-all adequate staffing level, but we just know it needs to be higher. And we do know from the research that there are definitely returns to higher staffing. And it's especially strong with RN staffing, right? We need those registered nurses in nursing homes to assess problems, notice problems, help the rest of the staff figure out how to solve those problems, to know when a resident needs to be hospitalized, et cetera. So there's really strong evidence behind RN staffing. And we know that most nursing facilities today, don't really meet that level. Now, whether or not that'll solve all the problems, probably not, right? We need other things other than just more staffing in nursing homes, but it's probably the most fundamental need that's not being met right now.
Are there any more pieces of the puzzle? I know we've been talking about understaffing and that kind of thing that you think is very important to mention as to fixing this problem with nursing homes as a whole.
I'm glad you asked that because there is one other aspect that comes up quite often in policy debates, and that is related to payment again and transparency. So most of the industry is for profit, and there are a lot of people out there who believe that nursing homes are just skimming off profits, and that if we didn't allow that we would have enough money in the system to hire more staff and improve quality. And I think nobody quite knows if that's really true or not, in part because there's not a lot of transparency in the data that allows us to follow the flow of public funds. So nursing homes make money off of Medicaid and then off of Medicare in terms of post-acute care, but we don't require them to report enough in their accounting practices to really know whether or not that money is going to patient care. And so that's the sort of other piece of the puzzle, right? We need to sort of follow the money and make sure money is getting spent for resident care.
This is the kind of topic that we all could relate to because we either have had family experiences or it's something that we think about in terms of our own life cycle. My wife's family, her mom, my mother-in-law, had Alzheimer's and ended up with 24/7 care in their apartment. But in order to do that, they had a summer place and they had to sell that in order to personally finance it. Her mother, my wife's grandmother, went to a nursing home at one point, was not upset about doing that, in part because the nursing home was really an excellent facility. But visiting her there was still, it was still an institution. And as even if it is kind of like a gold standard place, it still had problems. So I'm thinking, all right, we're getting past COVID and we're now returning to another world. What about the boomers who are coming through the system? And is there any cliff that we're about to go over because it's just going to get too many to even have the placements available for people?
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that really hopes that that pressure from the boomers will finally set us on a course of more fundamental change. Right. And I think an acknowledgement that we've probably been underfunding long-term care and we need to probably put more money into the system to get us all in a little better place when we age than seniors are facing right now.
Thank you so much, Professor Konetzka, for joining us today and sharing your expertise on the topic. We really appreciated it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And now turning to you Olympic fans, Summer Olympics are right around the corner and lots of events, lots of countries and all, some heroes who we don't even know yet may emerge. But we do have a fun fact from 2008, which was asked by NBC and the Wall Street Journal. And they asked, which of the following is your favorite category of Summer Olympic sports? Gymnastics, team sports such as basketball, baseball, soccer, swimming and diving, track and field. A whole variety of things. I know the answer to this. Americans say 29% said gymnastics, 24% went for this combination of team sports, swimming and diving at 18, track and field at 8 as well. Let me start out, and we're going to go to the younger generation on this very soon, but let's start with Mary. Mary, what are you going to be watching?
I'm a gymnastics fan, 100%. I love gymnastics. I go back to the Carrie Strug era of 1996. And I do enjoy diving, though. I'm not a big fan of swimming, so putting those two together sort of, But, Jay, amazing how NBC did a poll about the top Olympic sport to watch, right?
Yeah, gosh almighty. Jay, why don't you pick up on that? And are you going to be riveted by any of this?
Yeah, I'm not going to watch. I did watch it when I was a little kid, so I'm Nadia Comaneci if you really want to go back. Yeah, and I really haven't watched for a long time. I agree. Diving and gymnastics just because of the athleticism and because we don't see it. Outside. I know it's on. I know there's gymnastics meets and you can watch it on a Sunday afternoon, but I don't really see that. So I'm with Mary. I'm on Team Mary.
Okay, Barb.
I won't be actually, following the play-by-play, but I am someone that kind of does like to follow who's winning what. And it pretty much is any kind of sport. I love the gymnastics and the diving, especially, when they, get to the medal rounds. And then the other thing I know you guys are going to be all surprised to hear about. Yeah, dressage is a really big part of the horse world and being in the, being part of the Olympics. And that, if I follow anything that is streamed, I will be following the dressage.
You will not have any entries, however, into that.
No, certainly not. And there's been actually a number of controversies. So a number of the big players actually will not be part of that this time either.
Okay. Athen, what are you going to zero in from Maine? Zero into, I should say, from Maine.
Yeah, I am going to repeat the same things. Gymnastics is my number one. But I am interested if they did this poll again, if they would put some of the new sports like breaking. That's going to be interesting to watch this year.
All right. Okay. And we do have a lacrosse athlete amongst us. Delaney, what do you think you're going to be following?
I would have to say team sports, maybe because of my lacrosse dabbling. But I'm also especially excited to watch the women's basketball team because there was some controversy around that with Caitlin Clark not being on the team. And the all-star WNBA team actually just beat the Olympic team.
Olympic team. Yes, I did note that as well. Being a Clark fan myself, I did note that. So that was, nothing like getting beaten by the players you aren't inviting for the Olympics. Although the men just beat South Sudan by 1 point, which I thought was like a little bit wild.
I agree. Crazy. But I'm excited for that.
And Hunter, I purposely left you for last because you have been sort of like our emissary to France recently, and you've been checking out the Olympic this past week, correct? What did you see? Give us the insight.
Yeah, so my first stop when I was in Paris was to see how the Seine was doing. I am in complete shock that they're going to be swimming in that. I was hoping it would be a little bluer. It is indeed not any different than it was maybe a year or two ago. So I have to say I'm going to get on a 16-hour plane and go to Tahiti, where my choice is going to be the surfing, 100%.
You're not really going to Tahiti, are you?
No, my gosh, I wish. But,
I bought that
like
too.
The lucky
I was
pair,
like, wait a
no,
second.
Gosh.
Who's editing the podcast if he's going to be in Tahiti? That's all I was hearing there.
On that plane, that's a 16-hour flight for those poor athletes. But they have a lovely setup. I think they have a cruise ship. The Olympics bought a cruise ship for the week, and they're all being housed on a cruise ship in the Tahiti. And the other swimmers have to swim in the Seine. So it is not a fair comparison, and the divers and swimmers are not happy as far as I'm aware.
I'll say I like world records. I think some of the women's sports have become more interesting and get a lot more attention, both in gymnastics and the women's basketball, than it has in the past. And I think that's really a lot of fun. I also like world records being broken, and I'm not as much into each country getting more gold or not gold and all those things. I just want to see good athletes performing in a safe and athletic way. I always worry about the safety too, but hopefully everything will be good. And we'll catch up with you next week.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis, Delaney Hayes, and Hunter Petro.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
And finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you
In your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.